Welcome to Mostly Mets. I'm Jimmy Mack, and today what I'd like to do is preview the second series of the season between the Marlins and the Mets that starts tonight. We're throwing away the first series of the year. It was a bad offensive series. The pitching was fine, but we're just going to forget about that. It's opening weekend. We've seen a lot of good teams have bad starts. If you look at the Braves, they started off 0-4. So let's just move on and go up. Now we're going up against a team that is very beatable, right? The Marlins have won the first 3 out of the 4 games, but they're really not a great team. You look at them, there's not any household names. Now, they're going to be scrappy, and they always play the Mets well. No matter how bad they are, the Mets always have a hard time playing the Marlins. It's just a fact. We see it every single year. They always struggle against the Marlins and really against a lot of the lower-end teams. It's just how the Mets play, unfortunately. Now, hopefully that's different this year. You will be going up against one really good pitcher in this series, but it's a very beatable team, right? You look at the Marlins and what they've done so far. They've won their first 3 out of 4 games, all on walk-offs. So they're one-run games. They could go either way. They're playing against the Pirates, who aren't necessarily a great team. They have a great pitcher and they have a couple of good players, but they're not a good team either. I think a lot of people were high on them this year. I personally wasn't. So I don't put too much stock into them winning 3 out of 4 to start the season against the Pirates. But hey, listen, they're in first place right now in the NL East, so you can't sit here and say that they haven't earned it so far. It's very early, obviously, 4 games into the year for them. So first, what I want to do is really get into the pitching matchups. In Game 1, we have David Peterson going up against Cal Quantrill. Now, Peterson, this is his first start of the year after having his best year last year, a 2.9 ERA after missing a bunch of time in the beginning of the season with that hip surgery. And I'm interested in seeing how he performs this year. I'm not maybe as high on him, or I still see him as a question mark because he outperformed his career averages so much last year that I can't guarantee that same production is going to happen again. I don't think you can count on it. Now, he very well could, and maybe he turned a corner, and maybe he's becoming a top-of-the-line starting pitcher, or at least a very good mid-rotation pitcher. I could see that, but he has to show it. And he has a good opportunity here against a Marlins team that's, let's face it, has no real talent on their roster. Now, they've played above their talent so far this year, but I just don't see them being a real issue for a very good team like the Mets are supposed to be. So I'm excited to see Peterson. He's always had very good career numbers against the Marlins, even when he was struggling against everyone else. He has 9 starts against the Marlins. He's 4-2 with a 2.8 ERA in his career, so he's always pitched well against the Marlins. He's had some of his best games against them. So I expect a good game out of Peterson in Game 1. Cal Quantrill, kind of a back end of the rotation guy on even a decent team. Probably not really a guy who could make a good team. So he's a guy they should be able to hit. But we'll see. The Mets offense has struggled so far. We'll see if they can hit anyone at this point. We hope so. We think so. I know eventually they'll hit, so I'm not too worried about the offense. Now in Game 2, it's a very interesting matchup. You have Sandy Alcantara for the Marlins going against Kodai Senga for the Mets. 2 guys who missed basically all of last year. Alcantara was out the whole year. Senga pitched 5 innings. So it's 2 guys that really are trying to build back up and become dominant starting pitchers again like they were 2 years ago. Alcantara obviously is a Cy Young winner. He's a great pitcher, and he's a guy that the Mets are probably looking at as a trade target at the deadline this year. A lot of teams will be looking at Alcantara this year. He's a young enough, controllable arm. Yes, he has the injury history, but he's a very good pitcher who won a Cy Young, who can still be very effective at, I think he's only 28 or 29 years old. He's still a young guy, and he's under contract for the next few years, so he would be a huge target. He has pitched 1 game so far this year. He was 4+ innings. He gave up a few runs. He was great through the first couple innings, then kind of struggled, which is going to be a thing, right? He missed a whole year. He's not necessarily stretched out to go 7-8 innings like he used to. Eventually that will come for him, but right now he's still kind of in the groove of getting back in the groove of being a starting pitcher in the major leagues, which is pretty much exactly where Senga is right now. This is his first start of the year. He got knocked around a little bit in spring training, even though the number, the ERA doesn't necessarily show that, but he just wasn't very good in the spring. He wasn't sharp. He didn't look like himself. He said he was working on things, and he wasn't necessarily trying to get outs. He's just trying to repeat his mechanics and stay healthy and all that stuff. So we'll see when the lights come on. Maybe it's the same thing of like an Edwin Diaz, where he needs the lights to be bright before he performs. We'll see. I don't expect a long outing out of him. Maybe 4 innings, maybe 5 if he keeps his pitch count low. But I don't expect a long outing. First start of the year, and we're going to rely on the bullpen in that game. But I assume that the Marlins will also have to do the same, and I trust our bullpen over the Marlins. So, very interesting pitching matchup in Game 2 of two guys who are trying to get back after missing basically a whole season. All right, now in Game 3, we have Clay Holmes versus Connor Gillespie. Clay Holmes is the type of guy he is the guy that we thought was going to be dominant for the Mets coming out of spring training. He had a great spring training, and his first start didn't go quite as well. Now, he didn't pitch badly. I know a lot of people were concerned about his start, and yes, it was concerning because he didn't have control. But that's the thing with Holmes. He loses control sometimes. He's done it even as a reliever, so I'm not going to sit here and say that, he's done or he can't do it because of one start where he just didn't have his best stuff. He was really only throwing his fastball and his sinker. He wasn't throwing his new pitch much with that kick change. And I think he just didn't have the feel for his other pitches, and that's why he struggled. Now, he still went 4 2/3 innings. He only gave up 2 earned runs. He wasn't terrible. He just had 4 walks, and he wasn't able to ever get comfortable on the mound. So I'm excited to see another start for him, especially against a team that has lesser talent. I think you're going to be able to see him dominate. I really do think he's going to be dominant in this game, as long as he has his stuff, as long as he feels comfortable out there on the mound. Now, dominant for him, he's not going to go 7-8 innings. He's just not stretched to that point yet. But if you can get 5 2/3 or 6 innings out of him with maybe giving up 1 run, that would be great. I would just like to see him go out there and pitch a really good game. And they're going up against a lower-end kind of pitcher, so I think the offense needs to get going. That's going to be the most important thing. But those are the pitching matchups that we have for the Mets. All right, the keys to the series for the Mets, in my opinion, the first one overall being the offense needs to wake up. The bats need to wake up. Lindor needs to get rid of his early season struggles and start to hit. Pete Alonso needs to hit. Brandon Nimmo needs to hit. The only guy that's really hit in the lineup has been Soto. Brett Beatty, all these guys, nobody has hit. So they really need to wake up. They're going against, in 2 of the 3 games, substandard pitching. And even Alcantara, this is the time to get him. Alcantara's been great against the Mets in his career. He has a 3 ERA in 15 starts. He's been very good. But you're getting him at his weakest. You're getting him coming back from an injury, still trying to stretch out, still trying to become a major league starter again. So this is a good opportunity in this series for the offense to get right, and I think this will be kind of a get-right series for them. They always play the Marlins well, but the Marlins play them well also. So I think their offenses is a perfect opportunity for them to really get healthy and get ready and really get on a run here heading into the first home series of the year. They need to do that. It's a big opportunity for them here. Another key, obviously, we need to see what's going to happen with Senga. Senga, we don't know exactly what we're going to get from him at this point, especially early in the season. I think later on in the season, we kind of know what we have with him, or at least we think we know what we have with him. But it's going to be a struggle early in the season. I don't know that he's going to look like his dominant self, even against a lower-end team like the Marlins. But that's kind of a key for them. If the offense wakes up and they can go out and score 10 runs, sure, that's great. But if they can't, then Senga really needs to shut him down for at least 3 or 4 innings, because I think that's probably all he's going to be pitching in this game. We need to see at least a few innings of solid pitching out of him to think, okay, he's on the right track, he's getting to where he needs to be. And that's really a key for him. It's not about results necessarily, it's about looking healthy, looking like a legitimate major league pitcher for at least a few innings. And I think that's what you can expect out of him. Now, if he goes out there and pitches 5 or 6 innings and looks dominant, then that's even better. But we need to at least see something out of him to hang our hats on a little bit. The rotation so far has been pretty good, so Senga is a huge key to that, and we have to see him perform as well as the other starting pitchers have. All right, another key is Clay Holmes. We have to see if he can bounce back off of his first bad start and be more like the spring training Clay Holmes. I understand it was spring training. A lot of times you're facing lesser talent, but these Marlins are kind of a lesser talent. A lot of these guys in the Marlins lineup would not be in any other major league lineup. So you have to go out there and dominate a team like this. He has to go out there and show, because if you can't dominate a team like the Marlins, you're probably not dominating anyone. So go out there, pitch well, and prove a lot of people wrong, because there's a lot of people doubting him now. Coming off of that first start, saying he can't, throw enough strikes, he can't last more than 4 or 5 innings. He needs to go out there and prove them wrong, and just for his own confidence, he has to show himself that he's able to do it and be healthy and productive for an entire season. We're counting on him in a big way, so we have to see him bounce back against the Marlins, who are an inferior team. All right, and the last big key for the Mets in this series is the bullpen needs to keep it going. We've already talked about how Senga and Holmes probably aren't going to pitch a lot of innings. Peterson, I'm not as concerned about. I could see him going, 5 or 6 innings. But Senga and Clay Holmes, you don't know how many innings you're necessarily going to get out of them. The bullpen has been very strong so far this season in the first 3 games, and they need to continue that. Now, I'm not expecting them to be scoreless again for an entire series, 10 innings basically of no runs, but they have to keep the Mets in the game because they're going to pitch maybe 5, maybe even 6 innings in a couple of these games. So we'll have to see how they do. I believe in this bullpen. I think they're very deep. They have a lot of guys who can pitch in big situations, and they're going to be a real key for them in this series because I think they're going to have to pitch a lot of innings, not only in this series, but in a lot of the early season matchups this year. All right, so in wrapping this up, I think this will be a successful series for the Mets. I think they match up well with the Marlins, as I think everyone kind of matches up well with the Marlins. I think they'll start to hit. If I have to guess, I think, Pete always hits well against the Marlins. I know it's a whole different team, but it just seems like it's a team they're going to get right on, especially offensively. We'll see what the pitching staff is able to do. I can't necessarily expect the bullpen to be as good as they have been. And we'll see how many innings they get out of their starting pitching. I think if Senga and Holmes can give them any innings, this will be a really successful series. I could even see a sweep of this series. This is a team that they should dominate. They need to go out there and do that. I expect them to, but they're the Mets, so you never know. That being said, there's not really much to say, obviously. It's very early in the season. We don't have a lot of numbers, a lot of stats on these teams. So I can't sit here and go off on, name off all these stats and everything because they don't matter yet. There's been one weekend of the year. But really, at the end of the day, it's just about dominating this series. It's about dominating a bad team in the Marlins, a team that's expected to lose well over 100 games. They just have to go out there and do it. And if they don't, then maybe we have something to be concerned about. Maybe then we can say, maybe this team isn't as good as we thought. But right now, I tend to think they're going to do it against this team, and they're going to have a very good series and maybe even sweep. That would be nice. If you're still here, you like this content, give me a like, subscribe, comment what you think is going to happen in this series. What do you think your keys are for this series? And until next time, let's go Mets.